The formation of the first triumvirate altered the nature of Roman politics. The fluidity of Roman politics was still there, however allegiances in many cases became instead what was expedient, acts of commitment. This would have a long-term effect as lines would become more firmly drawn, as we shall see. The first triumvirate had short-term benefits and long-term problems. When it began to lose political support from the aristocrats, it would be Pompey who was most affected by it. Caesar, as consul in 59, introduced a bill to the Senate called the Lex Agraria, which would make public land and whatever private land voluntarily offered available to the poor citizens as well as to Pompey's veterans. Now, Cato and his allies had been opposing this type of legislation for 3 years, but Caesar knew this and perfected his bill so that even Cato could not find anything wrong with it. Caesar also said that he would make any reasonable changes to the bill, but the Catonians, Cato and his allies, did not want to grant Pompey or Caesar a victory, so Cato blocked the bill by filibustering for almost a month. Caesar lost his patience and threatened to have Cato thrown in jail. Cato, who wanted to provoke Caesar, willingly accepted that he be arrested. As a result, many of the Senate followed Cato to jail. Marcus Petrus, who had served long campaigns under Pompey, had joined Cato and told Caesar that he would rather be in jail with Cato than with Caesar in the Senate house. Now, this was a big deal because Marcus Petrus, by all intents and purposes, should have sided with Pompey through Caesar, but he didn't, and he won't be the only one. And I'll explain why in a few minutes. Now, let me remind you that during this time, Cato had been trying to paint Pompey as a military dynast, and Caesar as aiming for tyranny. To continue, Caesar had opted to push his bill through the People's Assembly, bypassing the Senate. Expecting trouble, Pompey had summoned all of his veterans to Rome to help pass the bill. When Caesar presented his bill to the people, he asked Lucullus, his co-consul, to find anything wrong with it and to suggest reasonable changes. They still could not find anything wrong with it, so Lucullus had said what Cato had said, that it was a change to tradition. So the people weren't happy with the answer because to them it seemed petty. Caesar pressured Lucullus, and Lucullus lost his temper and shouted that Caesar would never pass his bill, even if the people wanted it. Caesar then called on Pompey and Crassus. Now this was the first official unveiling of the triumvirate. Pompey was expected to support the bill, but Crassus supporting it came as a blow to the Optimates. Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus explained clearly why the bill was good. Pompey himself stated plainly that if force was used to obstruct this bill, that he would not hesitate to use force to secure its adoption. Now, according to Plutarch, this did not look good for Pompey, but Cato and Bibulus maintained obstruction to the bill. Bibulus had the right as a consul to claim omens, which meant that no public business could take place on that day, which means that Caesar could not pass his bill. So Bibulus will claim and continue to claim omens until one day he was beaten while on his way to claim more unfavorable omens. Cato was with him, but Bibulus was beaten and his consular fasces taken away. Bibulus, as a result, locked himself in his house his entire consulship, declaring omens from his home. He would write out declarations and send it out, but his edicts were extremely popular and his boycotting tactics were seen as rescuing the state's honor. Caesar ignored the omens and passed his bill anyway, creating a commission to oversee the distribution of land, which Pompey was on and most likely Crassus as well. But that wasn't the point for the Catonians. The point was to null and void all of Caesar's legislative acts, that he passed them during an omen so they technically didn't count. Pompey was able to finally pass his eastern settlements and obtain land for his veterans, but this came at a tremendous cost. Pompey will gradually lose all of his friends in the ruling class. The most obvious were the Metelli, after Pompey divorced his wife Mucia. The Cornelii Lentuli, who had been supporters of Pompey during the 60s, had also become anti-Pompeians. Lentulus Niger and Lentulus Cruz will go against Pompey. So will Lentulus Spinther and Lentulus Marcellinus. Some other names include Servilius Assaracus, who served under Pompey during his Mithridatic command, and his son as well became anti-Pompeian. Pompey will lose the support of the Sulli and the Memmiae. Pompey's brother-in-law Publius Sulla will abandon him, so will Faustus Sulla, the son of the dictator. Gaius Memmius, as well as another Gaius Memmius, who was Pompey's own nephew, will abandon Pompey as well. And all this will happen during and after 59, and all throughout the 50s. This was horrible for Pompey, who wanted nothing else but to be accepted by the aristocracy. The strategy of the Catonians, mostly done by Cato and Bibulus, the filibustering and the boycotting, the maintaining of a moral posture, driving the triumvirs to extreme measures, and making themselves into martyrs ruined the credit of the triumvirate with both the people and the aristocrats. Dissatisfaction with the triumvirate will spread throughout all of Italy and will eventually be described as the three-headed monster. By May of 59, Pompey had achieved everything he had wanted. He had his land grants for his veterans, his ratification of the East, and he and Caesar arranged for the recognition of King Ptolemy XIII Auletes as the rightful king of Egypt. But since his return from the East, it must have been painful for Pompey, who came home expecting to be the first man in Rome, but instead watched bitterly as his prestige and his influence dwindled to its lowest form. Already the triumvirate was beginning to crack because Pompey did not like how Caesar was handling the situation. The acts of the Catonians, especially Bullies, was beginning to take its toll on Pompey. By stressing the illegality of Caesar's acts, it touched on Pompey's sensitive side. He was feeling increasing discomfort at the situation. And now I'm going to read to you a passage from Cicero, who writes about Pompey's discomfort. What our friend Gnaeus is up to, I simply do not know, seeing that he's allowed himself to be pushed even to this length. Hitherto he has quibbled, taking the line that he approves of Caesar's legislation, but that Caesar himself must take responsibility for his procedure. Thus he, Pompey, was in favor of the agrarian bill, but whether opportunity was given for a veto or not was no concern of his. He was in favor of settling the king of Egypt's affair at long last, but whether or not Bullies had been watching the skies at the time, it was not his business to inquire. As for the tax farmers, he had a wish to oblige the equestrian order, but could not be expected to prophesy all that would happen if Bullies went down to the forum at that juncture. So out of Caesar, Crassus, and Pompey, why was Pompey suffering the most? Well, because with Crassus his power did not derive from the aristocracy, or at least not all of it. Most of his power came from his business dealings with the equestrian order. And by the way, he loved that Pompey, his rival, was losing his prestige. With Caesar, while he was being targeted and causing unrest, he procured for himself a comfortable command of Cisalpine Gaul and Illyricum once his consulship was over, which gave him command of 3 legions. So even though he was taking hits, he had at least something to look forward to after his consulship. With Pompey, the gradual decline of his former associates with the ruling class, as explained above, was a bitter pill to swallow. During this time, Clodius Pulcher was trying to transition to plebeian status through adoption so that he can run for the tribunate with the intention of getting his revenge on Cicero. And from April of 59 onwards, Cicero was worried. When his consular colleague Gaius Antonius was being prosecuted, Cicero was obliged to defend, despite the triumvirate wanting to support the prosecutors. But they understood how Cicero felt and what he needed to do. However, Cicero thought it wise to speak out against the triumvirate's actions during the trial. Cicero had said these things in the morning, and by the afternoon, Clodius Pulcher was able to run for the tribunate. The triumvirate overreacted in this situation, and what it really shows us is how the past 3 months of opposition had put them all on edge. Caesar presided over Clodius's adoption as Pontifex Maximus, while Pompey sat as an augur. But after the adoption, Caesar and Pompey regretted their actions and tried to make it up to Cicero. Pompey took steps to prevent Clodius from running for the tribunate. In April, Pompey pushed for a proposal to have Clodius sent to King Tigranes as an embassy, but this annoyed Clodius, and he managed to evade the proposal, which annoyed both Caesar and Pompey. Another attempt was made, and they tried to have Cicero be sent to Alexandria as an embassy to Ptolemy Auletes, but Cicero hesitated. He wanted to go to Alexandria so he can go sightseeing, but he did not want to owe the triumvirates. Furthermore, he did not want it to be seen as a bribe. Pompey sent his personal historian Theophanes to Cicero's best friend Atticus to try and have him persuade Cicero to accept the offer. These attempts failed, and Clodius had declared his intention to run for the tribunate with the intention of repealing Caesar's acts. The hatred of the triumvirate was not just in Rome, but also in the countryside. At Formiae, Cicero found that Pompey was hated, which suggests a few things. One is that the people might have seen Pompey as the leader of the triumvirate, that the greatest responsibility belonged to him. Another is that those who opposed the triumvirate were aware of the fact that Pompey was the most vulnerable to public opinion, and that he might be willing to change his stance as a result of it. Cicero was definitely aware of this, but he also feared that Pompey would resort to violence. However, why Cicero thought this is hard to say. In terms of power, Pompey had achieved all that he wanted to at the present moment, and what he really wanted was just to be accepted. Pompey had no choice at this moment but to stay in the triumvirate. But Pompey's increasing discontent had alarmed Caesar, and in an attempt to secure Pompey's allegiance, he offered his daughter Julia, to which Pompey accepted. He also allowed Pompey to be the first to speak in the Senate, a right which Crassus had. In the meantime, Clodius was fixated on his revenge against Cicero. Caesar tried to continue to protect Cicero by offering him a position as his legate, but Cicero declined. Pompey will continue to be loyal to Cicero, saying that Clodius would never proceed against him. But Clodius will definitely proceed against him, and Cicero will believe that Pompey was deceived. Pompey will even go as far as to say that he will protect Cicero to the death should Clodius attack him. The actions of the Catonians, especially Bibulus' edicts, had continued to rouse the crowd against the triumvirate. By July of 59, Cicero painted a vivid picture of Pompey. He writes, "So there is our poor friend, unused to disrepute, his whole career passed in a blaze of admiration and glory, now physically disfigured and broken in spirit, at his wit's end for what to do. He sees the precipice if he goes on, and the stigma of a turncoat if he turns back. The honest men are his enemies. The rascals themselves are not his friends. See now how soft-hearted I am. I could not keep back my tears when I saw him addressing a public meeting on the 25th of July about Bibulus' edicts. How magnificently he used to posture on that platform in other days, surrounded by an adoring people, every man wishing him well. How humble and abject he was then. What a sorry figure he cut in his own eyes, to say nothing of his audience. What a sight. Only Crassus could enjoy it, not so others. He was a fallen star. One looked upon him as a man who had slid rather than moved of his own volition. I suppose that if Apelles had seen his Venus, or Protagones his Ialisis, daubed with filth, he would have felt a pang as sharp as mine at the sight of this figure, painted and embellished with all the colors of my art, now suddenly made ugly. In view of the Clodius affair, nobody expects me to be his friend, yet my affection for him was more than any injury could dissipate. Naturally, Bibulus' Archilochian edicts against him are so agreeable to the public that one can't get past the place where they are posted for the crowd of readers. To their subject they are so painful that his mortification is making him look ill. Here we see again that things are not getting better for Pompey. The most popular thing at this moment is to hate the triumvirate. The crowds were flocking to read Bibulus' edicts. The strategy of the Catonians was working at the moment. Clodius in August will continue to threaten everyone, the triumvirate and Cicero and the honest men. Pompey continued to try and subdue Clodius, and they actually came to an agreement to leave Cicero alone, but Cicero did not believe him. Clodius was a deceitful character. Pompey was in deep regret, confiding to Cicero about his distress and even asking Cicero ways to get him out of the current situation, but Cicero did not believe anything could be done at the present moment. Pompey would move closer to Cicero because Cicero not only lended a sympathetic ear, but also could be used to arrange some sort of reconciliation with the Optimates. A strange plot occurred during the midsummer or autumn of 59. A man by the name of Lucius Vettius revealed the conspiracy of the leading nobles to assassinate Pompey. Vettius had told the young Curio about the plot, whom in turn told his father, and they brought the matter to Pompey, who then brought it to the Senate. Vettius, when questioned, revealed that the young Curio with a band of men and Bibulus had planned to assassinate Pompey. After a second hearing, Caesar intimidated Vettius into dropping more names. Among the names were mentioned already the Curiones, Bibulus, and then more the two Lentuli, Aemilius, Paulus, Domitius Ahenobarbus, Lucullus, Gaius Fannius, Gaius Piso, and Laterensis. He hinted about Cicero and named Marcus Brutus also. His testimony was quickly discredited. Paulus was not even in Italy, and Bibulus himself had warned Pompey of the plot. Vettius was chained and imprisoned, only to be found dead the next day. Who was behind the plot and why, we will probably never know. At the time, Caesar was suspected as being behind the plot. It could also have been Clodius Pulcher, or perhaps Crassus, or even Pompey himself. Vettius did serve on Pompey's staff when he was serving under his father, Pompeius Strabo. It is all speculation, really. It does, however, appear that Caesar, during the second senatorial hearing, had induced Vettius to alter his testimony into dropping Marcus Brutus, the son of Caesar's mistress, Servilia. Whoever was behind the plot, it quickly dropped and nobody was prosecuted or suffered any loss of prestige. Clodius kept up the attack against Pompey, spreading rumors that Cicero was behind the plot against his life. It seemed that Pompey did not actually believe the rumors. He continued to support Cicero against Clodius in 59, and for the consular elections, Pompey supported a man of his camp, Gabinius, as well as Caesar supported his father-in-law, Lucius Piso. These men will be elected consul. The young Gaius Cato, a relative of Cato the Younger, tried to prosecute Gabinius, but after the plot against Pompey's life, Pompey seemed to have risen a little in popularity. The crowd was angered by Gaius Cato, and he narrowly escaped with his life. The year 59 was a pivotal one in Roman politics. Caesar and Crassus had risen in stature, Pompey's greatness had diminished, Cato's strategy had taken most of the nobility out of Pompey's camp and turned them against him. However, Cato's leadership was not really acknowledged on a wide scale, nor did the Senate divide into two political parties. The weakening of Pompey's leadership had freed a great many nobles to become more independent. Senatorial politics as a result became further fragmented, but in the eyes of the aristocracy, this was a sign of strength, not weakness or atrophy. The next year, Clodius had passed several legislations as tribune. The consuls Piso and Gabinius were openly supporting Clodius. Clodius had given both consuls 5-year commands, Piso in Macedonia and Gabinius in Syria. Gabinius' support of Claudius against Cicero most likely reflects how Pompey truly felt. Of course, Gabinius had his own reasons to support Claudius, like the nice command he had given him, but when the time came that Claudius was trying to exile Cicero, Pompey's support was nowhere to be found. Pompey was probably hoping to let Claudius have his day, so that he would leave Pompey alone, and also felt that it would be easier to recall Cicero. Just to recap as to why Claudius wanted to exile Cicero, Cicero was being prosecuted for the execution of Catiline conspirators back in 63 as revenge for his actions against Clodius during the Bona Dea scandal. The praetors Gaius Memmius, along with Domitius and Helbarbus, discussed a measure for the recall of Cicero from exile. Clodius had also passed a law annexing the kingdom of Cyprus and the restoration of exiles to Byzantium. He gave the command to Cato the Younger as an attempt to get rid of him. He also made changes to the consul's ability to declare unfavorable omens so that men like Bullies could not abuse it. However, Pompey's abandoning Cicero to please Clodius will soon backfire. Clodius will interfere with Pompey's eastern arrangements by making Brogataris of Galatia the title of king, and also the title of high priest. Pompey had originally made Diotarus king and high priest, but the worst thing Clodius did against Pompey was abduct the son of Tigranes, who Pompey had been holding hostage at the home of Pompey's friend Lucius Flavius. By now, Clodius had a gang with him, which is why he was able to abduct the young Tigranes. There was a skirmish on the Appian Way between Flavius and Clodius, in which several men were killed, including Pompey's friend Papirius. This forced Gabinius to side with Pompey. However, Clodius attacked him and broke his fasces, as well as consecrated Gabinius' property. The motive as to why Clodius decided to attack Pompey is up for conjecture. He may have assumed that Pompey would work on recalling Cicero from exile, so as to take proactive measures to prevent it. Whatever the reason was, Pompey lent his support to the tribune Lucius Ninius, who proposed Cicero's recall in June but was vetoed. Pompey told Atticus, Cicero's best friend, that he would bring the matter up again after the elections. Clodius threatened again to undo Caesar's legislation should anyone interfere with him, but his threats were ignored. So Clodius spiced things up and created a fake plot to assassinate Pompey. A slave of Clodius was caught on August 11th by the consul Gabinius with a dagger. He was questioned, and he said that he was sent by Clodius to assassinate Pompey. Pompey in response went home and barricaded himself and did not leave for the entire year. His anger from the humiliation only strengthened his resolve to see Cicero recalled from exile. The tribune Cullio brought up the idea of divorcing Julia and breaking away from Caesar and closer with the Optimates, but Pompey refused. Pompey would work with the Optimates like the tribune Cestius, who was sent to Caesar for his approval of Cicero's recall, which he gave, and the consul designate of 57, Lentulus Spinther, and eventually Metellus Nepos, who was also going to be the consul of 57, also gave his approval. Once Clodius' tribunate was over, Cicero's recall came swiftly. On January 1st, Lucius Cato thought the Senate's vote would suffice, but Pompey argued to put Cicero's recall into a law. Pompey's friend, the tribune Gaius Messius, brought forward the bill and again on January 25th by Fabricius. But Clodius was not out of the game yet. His only weapon left was violence. A riot ensued and stopped the passage of the bill, but Pompey had enough. Pompey had made the issue go from only within the Senate to the entire Italian peninsula. He summoned men from his estates and areas of influence and sent them to join the gangs of the tribunes Cestius and Milo, who were creating a gang to fight back against Clodius. Pompey will personally tour the cities in the countryside, summon his vast clientele to help vote for Cicero's recall, and when the vote came in the Senate in June, only one senator voted against it. The decree was then ratified by the people, and Cicero was recalled, landing in Brundisium, where he timed his arrival to a Roman holiday, the Ludi Romani. Cicero's return to Rome coincided with a grain supply issue. Clodius had instigated a riot and blamed Cicero for the short supply of grain since many people in Italy had gone to Rome to vote for his recall. Cicero, 2 days after he returned to Rome, and who was extremely grateful towards Pompey, had called for a special commission to deal with the short supply of grain, in which Pompey should be given the command of. This was a very powerful command. Pompey would be in control of nearly every source of grain in the Roman world. When the Senate convened to hear Pompey's needs for the commission, they were reasonable. He asked for only 15 legates and requested Cicero as his first. The consuls Spinther and Nepos drafted up a proposal to give the command for 5 years. Then Tribune Messius had proposed to give Pompey pretty much the exact same powers he had during his command against Mithridates: an army, a fleet, control of the treasury, jurisdiction over all the provinces. This was probably Pompey's move to see what the opinion would be before he gave his own opinion. When asked, he said that the proposal from the consuls was enough. The Senate did not like the tribune's proposal, and so Pompey accepted the consuls, claiming that that was all he wanted in the first place. The issue of the corn supply was mainly a logistical one, and Pompey took his command seriously. He employed the same strategy as he did for his piracy command. He split up the Mediterranean amongst his 15 legates. Unfortunately, we only know 2 of his legates, Cicero, which was more of an honorary role, and Cicero's brother Quintus, who was serving in Sardinia. Pompey himself would go wherever he was needed, and he was allowed to be in Rome when he was needed there as well. His grain commission won Pompey glory amongst their own people, since he took up a modest role and was solving their grain problem. Pompey could end the year of 58 with relative success. He recalled Cicero, rose again in prestige, and benefited from Cicero's return with the grain commission, but over the horizon loomed many threats. There was still the issue of Caesar's rise to power, the jealousy of Crassus, and Clodius.